Hellhole Canyon is one of the foundational lands that's part of the county's multiple species conservation program. And that's the county's conservation program that's aimed specifically at preserving endangered species. At Hellhole Canyon alone, there's more than 300 species of plants, 150 different animal species, and the vast majority of those are on the rare, threatened, and endangered list and need to be protected. So we're not just preserving open space when we acquire more land up in North County to add to Hellhole Canyon Preserve. We're actually preserving endangered species.
Our group works with county, state, and other organizations to acquire appropriate land to enhance the preserve, and also another big part of our mission is educating the public as the value of open space.
I think what few people realize is that the most successful conservation efforts are usually local community based. And that's what you see up in Valley Center at Hellhole Canyon. The Friends of Hellhole Canyon are the reason that preserve exists.
The California landscape, well, in Southern California, especially along the coast, there's been a great deal of development. And something that people are becoming more conscious of is that if it's built out, then if it's built over, then we're losing this great variety of plants and animals that's unique to this part of the world.
If we don't have people that are activists and acting out to preserve and save this land, all kinds of things can happen. Tract homes come in, developers come in, orange groves come in, and people say, well, what's wrong with that? But you know, that is destroying land and it'll never return to its original state.
I was born here in San Diego County in 1943, but I was so fortunate because you think about 1943 as during World War II. And during World War II, my father, David Toller Sr., was born in Virginia. And then so the war, he came out to be stationed here in San Diego because of the Pacific Theater. And he met my mother. My mother is a descendant from the Kumeyaay.
They have a tremendous amount of knowledge that they acquired over the years, and I think we would hope we can tap into that and gain more of that so it will benefit the whole community and our relationship to this area, because they were really the stewards of the land.
Now, on the native side, my grandmother was born up here in the Mesa Grande Indian Reservation in 1905. I did a genealogy and I published a book called Blood of the Band. And in that Blood of the Band, we did research, and it was so interesting. And I knew, because my grandmother was a little short, black-eyed, dark lady, they were very, very interesting folks to be able to go through that transitional period of when this region was pretty raw. They moved here and was able to make a home. And then so consequently, their offspring, which is my mother and her sister and her brothers, we are just one family in this region, and there's so many others that have the same kind of relationships with the land on the reservation.
The knowledge they hold is really the keys to how best to inhabit this area and live here in harmony.
One of the many things that I really enjoy in life is the idea that socializing with the other folks that are descendants from the original native people. We have our culture, we have our gatherings, there is singers that sing the song cycles. There's really a diverse population here in San Diego County with the 18 reservations, and 12 of them are Kumeyaay. We have the Luiseños, which is a unique people in the Cahuilla, and there's a small group called the Copinos. So this is a well-diversed area, and the Kumeyaay territory, which is just right here, practically a stone's throw from where we're at, goes all the way into Baja California, down past Ensenada, about 30 miles.
There was a time when the county's conservation program was under review, and it was a little bit uncertain whether it was going to continue or not. The County Board of Supervisors held a public hearing.
I know it was when Regan was president, he did a project they called the Escondido Project, and he was going to open up all the public lands, the BLM, Bureau of Land Management lands, on the western slope.
And a number of people came down, and I remember one gentleman, I didn't have a chance to meet him, and I haven't seen him since then, but he came down and he spoke with such passion about what it means, and he talked about the programs and the space itself rejuvenating his soul. And I thought, man, like that resonates, right? You know, I feel it.
The municipalities had an option, and also the Indian reservations had an option. And as this thing started to have the hearings, I was interested in wanting to see that this area was protected. And they had several hearings, and I went to those hearings and was able to speak in defense of maintaining and keeping this area out here in the hands of the federal government. And the reason I felt as if that would be more beneficial, because it was less intrusive, more protective of it, and the local agencies were probably more aggressive. So during this time, the County of San Diego had put an application in for this 3,400 acres, and they had spoke, I had spoke, and there was a few others that had spoke in it, and the end result was, and I would like to think that there was some influence by the opinions that some of us had, is to keep this in the status of the federal less intrusive hands. And sure enough, when the federal government made its decision, it worked out a deal, for the lack of a better term, with the County of San Diego on half of it, 1,700 acres, and the other 1,700 acres has been left intact, and it's still in the BLM.
I think the county's partnership with the local Native American tribes is critical to our long-term conservation program. Many of the lands which ultimately we'd like to add to the preserve or maintain as conserved lands are owned by the tribes. And they share a common goal and a common mission to preserve them, not just culturally, which of course is very important to the history of the tribe, but also biologically, because those resources are an important part of the history, and I think we both agree, an important part of the future for the county.
Hellhole Canyon is home to a really, really large variety of species, and not always immediately obvious. For instance, there's several varieties of bats that live back here, and they wouldn't be able to live here if we had greater density. These bats are also connected with pollinating certain plants and keeping down insects. So we have foxes and raccoons, bobcats, coyotes, all the way up to mountain lions.
Every living creature at some point requires water, right? And so what you have at Hellhole Canyon is the beginning of what we call a corridor, but that's sort of a play on words, because it's multiple corridors. It's a wildlife corridor. It's a water corridor. It's actually a human corridor, because we're trying to connect trails through multiple wild experiences for people. And Hellhole is really the beginning of that. It's the start of that in North County, San Diego. And so what you have is this amazing variety of wildlife, both plants and animals, with animals passing through that are moving on to different parts of the county, closer to the coast or further east.
The connectivity is really important, and I hope to raise awareness in people's minds that they know that how important to keep all of this open space connected so that these animals can roam freely.
Growing up, my grandmother used native plants both for food and medicine. And so I saw that the local plants were a source of health and sustenance. So I've studied this all my life. So taking a hike through the chaparral is like walking through a neighborhood of old friends. I think that as more of us would do that, we would be able to be more in balance with the environment and understand why we have to preserve essentially the accumulated wisdom of a species that is so well adapted to this environment and weather.
Many people don't realize wildfire is a natural part of the ecology of places like Hellhole Canyon. And many people who visit don't realize that major wildfires came through parts of the canyon in both 2003 and in 2007.
Left untouched, without fires, it gets so thick that you just can't go through it. And then also when it gets so thick, the grasses don't grow. And also you have such a vegetation that uses the water from the springs, so consequently you do not have water And so yes, there is a back to the balance of fire as a preservation.
We have a very much a fire and water ecology back here, and those have to be managed also. But it seems that the return of the deer herd and also they're the main prey of mountain lions, so that's again showing that the ecosystem is healthy and resilient.
Well, in the early years after a wildfire, before the vegetation grows back to its full density, it actually can improve wildlife movement because it's easier to get around. And you're seeing the natural sort of rebirth of Hellhole Canyon.
It's made to burn. I don't know what that cycle is. You don't want to burn it too much, but there is a balance.
Captivated right now with this Rodriguez Mountain because of the morning light. When you come to this preserve and it's called Hellhole Canyon, you're all of a sudden captivated by this magnificent mountain that is so much granite. If perhaps those granites hold a lot of iron in them, because at sunset, if it holds the iron, then they'll have a tendency periodically to turn the mountain red or have a nice red hue to it. But I'm noticing there's a shelf halfway up that mountain, and there's some what appears to be some trees.
To my knowledge, those are pine trees and survived through the fires. Because of that one flat area right there, it actually creates a riparian woodland habitat that allows trees like that to grow.
We offer a variety of environmental education programs at Hellhole Canyon, and that's critical to the core mission of the county.
See how red that earth is? And I break it up, add a little moisture to it. It's got pigment in it. And iron, that's what causes that mountain to turn a little red. So this would have been a resource probably for the old folks who would have enjoyed gathering and using. I think it has a clay context to it as well.
We didn't really truly have an appreciation of the outdoors until we experienced it, and it resonated with us on a personal and on a spiritual level. And it's really important to create that in people of young ages because studies have shown if you don't get it when you're young, you rarely do when you're older. And so you start with the kids, and it's one of the reasons that the elementary and secondary school age education programs are so important that are being run out of Hellhole, is because we're developing stewards, people who are going to continue this program after we've moved on.
We'd have healthier kids because they're seeing real plants and real bugs and real animals, and they're hearing real sounds. It's not digital, it's not on a little screen. It's totally interactive. They can smell it, they can feel it, they see what they do. There's a lot of unpredictability. They learn to do it, and it's essentially what we were built for. And so they, I think, grow in a lot more natural way. Do you know what bird makes that sound? Do you hear it?
No, I did not. Be quiet.
Wait.
Mockingbird? Regular bird? Owl? No. A tree.
It's kind of like an owl sound. Getting into nature lets us pace ourselves to a different time sense. The speed of water running, of birds flying, of insects chirping, I think all creates a whole ambience that puts us in a natural rhythm and is restorative and healing.
What did you find?
Four matate.
So what were these used for?
Grinding acorns. We need to protect nature because the trees help us breathe. Yeah.
That's why we need open space, an accessible open space, so that children and adults can get out and get back out in nature and reconnect. Something unique about this area, in spite of its name, Hellhole Canyon, it actually is very much part of the maritime environment in that we totally have a coastal effect. Many days of the year, the fog comes up these canyons, and the moisture it provides benefits a lot of the local plants, and they've adopted to harvesting essentially that moisture from the air. So it oftentimes stays green even if when we don't have a lot of rain. And if there's an extended drought period, it shrivels up and then the plant stays alive until which time more moisture is available. But there's many mornings when the fog comes in or pours in over the hills, reminiscent of like the Bay Area, but you don't normally think of this area as being part of the coast, but it definitely is. If you go over Palomar Mountain, it's after a certain rain harvest area immediately on the other side of the mountain, then you get into a much more drier environment than you see on this side, west of Palomar. And during the summer, where the coast could be dry or sunny, we get thunderheads building up and summer thunderstorms, and so there's a tremendous amount of water gets stored in this area.
If you ever want to really experience visually how a watershed functions, Hellhole Canyon is a great place to go because there are places on the trail where you can get to a high point and you're really looking out over the entire watershed. And you can see how the Southern California natural drainage works, funneling water and rainfall into an area that ultimately makes its way to the county's beaches.
In San Diego County, I believe there's 5 major watersheds. We are in one, is the San Luis Rey, and we're in the Hell Creek, tributary to the San Luis Rey River, and this area drains up. We are at approximately 2,000 foot elevation here, and the mountain behind us is Rodriguez Peak, is 3,886 feet, I believe, somewhere in that neighborhood. Now, what makes this area so interesting is that the ridge just east of us is a dividing part from the San Luis Rey River watershed and the San Dieguito watershed. Back to the San Luis Rey watershed, it drains all the way up into the highest point in San Diego County, which is Hot Springs Peak, which is on the Los Cayos Indian Reservation, and it's like over 6,500 feet. And it makes its course goes on down through the valleys. It has some major tributaries coming into it, and it empties into the Pacific at Oceanside. On the other hand here, and it doesn't take too much on this ridge just east of it, is the San Dieguito Rivershed. The San Dieguito Rivershed drains in what we call the Wajita Creek. We're closer to Wajita Creek, and it drains into the San Pasqual Valley. From San Pasqual Valley, it makes its way down through the south end of Escondido into Del Diaz, through Rancho Santa Fe, and ends up in Del Mar.
Ultimately, my greatest affinity is to the chaparral. And even though for the people that don't understand it, might look at it as just scrub or wasteland, it is actually extremely rich and diverse environment that's constantly changing, not in a 4 seasons type of way like on the East Coast. It has longer term cycles that are seen only over the years.
Yeah, the last acquisition of almost 600 acres took place earlier this year, and I vividly remember when our board approved that because several members of the Friends of Hellhole came down, traveled actually a long way, unexpected to me, and I was surprised by that. And it was a great thing because it gave us an opportunity to celebrate that together, and it's so worthy of celebration. And then to also keep the momentum going and talk about how we're going to do more of this working together in the future. So it was a great moment for me, and it's just a great example of how that partnership and why that partnership is so important to our continued conservation efforts.
With a variety of these organizations in a collaborative effort, have been able to establish a wildlife corridor. And looking at our region here in Southern California, as we know, we have the Pacific Ocean, and we have these watersheds that extend all the way into the Peninsula Range up to probably 60 miles or so inland from the coast. And this whole wildlife corridor is so important to be able to attach the biological diversity of a lot of the different animals. And if we want to go beyond the range here in the coastal side, we drop into the desert, which is also very, very important here because of the wildlife that is in existence there, is that we have the bighorn sheep in the desert side. It doesn't take too much to get into the mountains with the mule deer and the white-tailed deer. And then consequently, to be able to survive, We have the cats that need to be able to have something to harvest to be able to raise their young. And so this region has been developed in the last, well, let's say, well, since the Spanish came here in 1769, but more progressively after the turn of this last century with the City of San Diego, U.S. military, and so on. And fortunately, with these organizations that we've discussed, there's been some, maybe not enough, conservation. We have a lot of challenges because of the climate here and the desire to be able to develop. We do have property owner rights, and we have to give, and they're paying their property taxes. But on the other hand, the citizens of this county have a responsibility to do everything within their power to be able to help preserve the natural resources in this area.
Finding heaven in Hellhole Canyon is really a great way of showcasing the preserve. A lot of people would think, with a name like Hellhole Canyon, why would I want to go there? That actually first came up in the late 1800s when gold prospectors were searching for gold down there and remarked that it was hotter than hell, right? And who would want to go all the way down to the bottom? But I have to tell you, having been up there, I'm not going to lie, in the heat of summer, it can get pretty hot. But in the fall and in the winter and in the springtime, it's quite pleasant and it's amazing. And so I challenge anybody who's watching to see for themselves what Hellhole Canyon is all about by going up there and visiting.